The jungle stretched endlessly in every direction, its canopy so thick that sunlight barely touched the forest floor. Dr. Rebecca Stone wiped sweat from her forehead as she followed the strange reptilian creature through the undergrowth. The Altarian guide moved with careful, deliberate steps, its scaled skin shifting from green to brown as it navigated between the massive tree trunks. "Your people," the alien said in broken English, its voice like gravel grinding together, "must stay close. This place holds many dangers." Rebecca nodded, adjusting the weight of her sample collection kit. Behind her, 5 other humans from the research vessel Endeavour struggled through the humid air. Chief Engineer Paul Reeves muttered complaints about the heat, while Communications Officer Lisa Park documented everything with her recording device. The Altarian Confederation had agreed to this cultural exchange reluctantly. Their leaders spent 3 days in heated discussions before allowing humans to visit Verdania, their sacred forest moon. Even now, Rebecca could sense their guide's nervous energy as it constantly scanned the trees above them. "What exactly are we looking for?" Paul asked, pushing aside a curtain of hanging vines. His engineering mind always wanted concrete objectives. "Plants," Rebecca replied. "Specifically anything that might have medicinal properties. Earth's pharmaceutical companies are very interested in alien botanicals." The guide suddenly stopped. Its head tilted upward, and Rebecca followed its gaze to see clusters of bright crimson fruit hanging from the branches 30 feet above. The fruits were roughly the size of apples, their surface smooth and almost glowing in the filtered sunlight. "Beautiful," Lisa whispered, raising her camera. The Altarian's skin immediately shifted to a pale white color. It stepped backward, nearly stumbling over a fallen log. "No," it said sharply. "No pictures. No touching. We go different path now." "Wait," Rebecca said, her scientific curiosity immediately triggered. "What are those fruits?" "They look incredible." "Death fruit," the guide said, its voice barely above a whisper. "Touch means death. Smell means death. Even look too long brings curse," Paul laughed. "Come on, they're just fruit. How dangerous could they be?" The Altarian's large eyes widened with what Rebecca recognized as pure terror. "Your people do not understand. These fruits, they kill everything. Birds, insects, mammals. Aldi fast. Very fast." Rebecca pulled out her scanner and aimed it at the fruits above. The device beeped softly as it analyzed the chemical composition from a distance. The readings showed complex organic compounds unlike anything in Earth's databases. "Fascinating," she murmured. "The biochemistry is completely alien." "Please," the guide begged, now backing away even further. "We must leave this place. Death fruit brings only sorrow. How exactly do they kill?" Rebecca asked, unable to suppress her scientific interest. "Is it airborne toxins? Contact poison?" The Altarian's skin had gone completely white now, a sign of extreme distress that Rebecca had learned to recognize during their brief cultural orientation. "Stories say 1 bite, 1 touch brings death in minutes. Organs stop. Blood turns poison. Body becomes cold stone." Lisa lowered her camera but kept recording audio. "Have you ever seen it happen?" "My grandfather told stories. His grandfather told stories. All Altarians know. Death fruit is why we live in cities now. Why we fear deep forest." Paul stepped closer to examine the tree trunk. "So nobody has actually seen what happens? It's all just stories passed down through generations?" The guide's distress intensified. "Stories keep us alive. Stories are truth." Rebecca understood the cultural significance, but her scientific training demanded evidence. "Could we collect just 1 sample? For analysis on our ship? We have proper containment protocols." "No." The Altarian's voice cracked with panic. "Cannot take death fruit from forest. Cannot bring curse to ship. Your people will die. All will die." The exchange continued for several minutes, with Rebecca trying to negotiate while the guide became increasingly agitated. Finally, they agreed to continue the tour through a different section of forest. But Rebecca noticed that Paul kept glancing back at the crimson fruits hanging temptingly in the canopy. As they walked away, the guide began chanting something in its native language. Rebecca's translator picked up fragments about protection and safe passage. "Superstitious," Paul muttered to Lisa. "Probably just regular fruit that tastes bad or gives you a stomach ache." "Over generations, the stories got exaggerated," Lisa nodded. "Like how some Earth cultures used to think tomatoes were poisonous." Rebecca wasn't so sure. The biochemical readings had shown compounds that didn't match anything in known databases. But the guide's terror seemed genuine. not the kind of casual fear that comes from old wives' tales. They spent the rest of the day cataloging safer plants, but Rebecca's mind kept returning to those crimson fruits. The Altarian guide remained nervous throughout the tour, frequently checking the canopy above them and hurrying the group past any trees that might harbor the mysterious death fruit. By evening, they had collected dozens of plant samples, but nothing as intriguing as those forbidden crimson spheres. As they prepared to return to their landing shuttle, Rebecca made a mental note to research Altarian cultural history. There might be records of actual encounters with the death fruit, something more concrete than folklore. Paul helped load the sample containers, but Rebecca noticed him frequently looking back toward the forest canopy. His engineering mind was clearly still puzzling over the afternoon's encounter. "What do you think?" Lisa asked as they secured their equipment. "Are they really that dangerous?" Rebecca considered the question carefully. The Altarians' terror had seemed genuine, but fear wasn't scientific evidence. "I think we need more data," she said finally. "But we need to respect their cultural boundaries too." As their shuttle lifted off from Verdania's surface, Rebecca watched the forest disappear below them. Somewhere in that green maze, crimson fruits hung in the darkness, surrounded by centuries of fear and mystery. She had no way of knowing that Paul had already started planning a return trip. 3 days passed aboard the Endeavour, while the research team processed their botanical samples in the ship's laboratory. Rebecca worked methodically through each specimen, cataloging cellular structures and chemical compositions. The Altarian plants showed fascinating adaptations to Verdania's unique atmospheric conditions. Paul found excuses to visit the lab frequently, always asking about the analysis results. His questions seemed casual, but Rebecca noticed he kept bringing the conversation back to the forbidden crimson fruits. "Any luck identifying those compounds you scanned?" he asked during his 4th visit of the day. "The readings were too distant for detailed analysis," Rebecca replied, not looking up from her microscope. "Besides, we agreed to respect their cultural restrictions." Paul leaned against the lab bench. "I've been thinking about that. Maybe their restrictions come from incomplete understanding. What if the death fruit isn't actually poisonous to humans?" Rebecca finally looked up. "That's a dangerous assumption, Paul. Think about it logically," he continued. "Altarians are reptilian, cold-blooded. Their biochemistry is completely different from ours. Something that kills them might not even affect us." Lisa entered the lab carrying her daily report files. She caught the end of their conversation. "Are you two still talking about those fruits?" "Paul thinks we should have collected samples," Rebecca said. Lisa set down her files. The guide seemed genuinely terrified. "I've never seen an Altarian react like that to anything." "Exactly my point," Paul said. "Their fear is based on their species biology. Humans eat things that would kill other Earth animals all the time. Chocolate kills dogs. Avocados are toxic to birds, but we eat both without problems." Rebecca had to admit his logic had merit, but something about the situation felt wrong. "The scanner readings showed complex organic compounds I've never encountered. We don't know what they do." "Which is exactly why we should study them," Paul pressed. "Isn't that what we're here for? Scientific discovery?" Over the following days, Paul's arguments became more persistent. He researched everything available about Altarian biology and physiology, building his case that human biochemistry might handle the death fruit differently. "Look at this," he said, cornering Rebecca in the mess hall. "Altarians can't process capsaicin at all. Even mild peppers cause severe burns in their digestive system. But humans evolved to eat peppers. We actually enjoy the burning sensation." "That's different," Rebecca argued. "We're talking about something their entire culture considers deadly. Their entire culture also believed their sun was a living god until they developed astronomy," Paul countered. "Traditional beliefs aren't always scientifically accurate." Lisa joined them, carrying her meal tray. "What's the debate today?" "Paul wants to go back for death fruit samples," Rebecca said. Lisa nearly choked on her drink. "Are you insane?" "I'm being scientific," Paul said. "We have portable containment units. We could collect one fruit, bring it back to the ship, and analyze it properly. If it's truly dangerous, we destroy it. If not, we've learned something important." "And if you're wrong?" Lisa asked. Paul shrugged. "Then I die quickly according to the Altarians. But I don't think I'm wrong." Rebecca studied his face. Paul was a brilliant engineer, not given to reckless behavior. His confidence seemed genuine, based on careful analysis rather than foolish bravado. Even if you're right about human biochemistry being different, she said, the Altarians would never allow it. They'd see it as a violation of their sacred taboos. Then we don't tell them, Paul said quietly. The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. Lisa looked shocked. But Rebecca found herself considering the possibilities. If Paul was right, they might be missing an incredible scientific opportunity. If he was wrong, at least they'd know for certain. You're talking about deceiving our hosts, Lisa said. That could destroy diplomatic relations. Or it could prove that their fears are unfounded, Paul replied. Think about how many worlds they've probably avoided because of similar superstitions. We might be helping them. Rebecca felt torn between scientific curiosity and ethical responsibility. The crimson fruits had haunted her thoughts since their forest expedition. The scanner reading suggested biochemical properties unlike anything known to Earth science. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. Paul pulled out a small device. Personal transport pod. I can reach the forest alone, collect one fruit and return within 6 hours. The Altarians would never know. Absolutely not, Lisa said. If something goes wrong, we'd have no way to help you. Nothing will go wrong, Paul insisted. I'm not planning to eat it. Just collect a sample for proper analysis. Rebecca weighed the risks against the potential scientific value. The death fruit represented a complete unknown, possibly containing compounds that could revolutionize medicine or biochemistry. Even if I agreed, she said slowly, which I'm not saying I do, how would you explain your absence? Engineering inspection of the shuttle bay. Routine maintenance. I do it all the time. Lisa stood up abruptly. This is crazy. You're talking about risking your life based on a theory about alien fruit. I'm talking about advancing human knowledge, Paul said. Isn't that why we're out here? Rebecca remained silent, but she couldn't deny the appeal of his argument. Every major scientific breakthrough required someone willing to take calculated risks. That night she lay awake in her quarters thinking about the decision. The Altarian guide's terror had been real, but fear wasn't evidence. Paul's biochemical analysis seemed sound, though incomplete. By morning, she had made her choice. She found Paul in the engineering section working on routine systems maintenance. One fruit, she said quietly. Sealed containment. Full biohazard protocols. And if anything seems wrong, you abort immediately. Paul's face lit up with excitement. You won't regret this. I already regret it, Rebecca replied. But I need to know what we're dealing with. Neither of them noticed Lisa standing in the corridor outside, having heard every word. Paul's transport pod descended through Verdania's atmosphere under cover of darkness. The forest moon's 3 small moons provided just enough light to navigate by as he guided the craft toward the same clearing where they had landed during their official visit. His hands trembled slightly as he activated the pod's stealth mode. This was either brilliant scientific investigation or the stupidest thing he had ever done. Rebecca's final warning echoed in his mind. Any sign of danger, any at all, and you get out immediately. The jungle looked different at night. Phosphorescent fungi created an eerie blue glow along the tree trunks, and strange creatures called from the canopy above. Paul activated his suit's environmental systems and stepped out into the humid air. His scanner had recorded the location of the death fruit trees from their previous visit. Following the device's guidance, he made his way through the undergrowth, trying to move as quietly as possible. The Altarian settlement was several kilometers away, but he didn't want to take any chances. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, he found the right grove. The crimson fruits hung like jewels in the moonlight, their smooth surfaces reflecting the phosphorescent glow from nearby fungi. They looked even more beautiful in the darkness, almost inviting. Paul activated his containment unit, a small cylindrical device designed for collecting hazardous biological samples. The unit's manipulator arm extended upward, reaching toward a cluster of fruits hanging just within range. He had almost secured his sample when a thorn from a nearby branch scraped across his glove, tearing the protective material. Before he could react, the same thorn dragged across his exposed wrist, leaving a thin line of blood. Damn, he muttered, checking the cut. It was shallow but bleeding freely. He reached for his medical kit when he noticed something strange. The blood from his cut was changing color, turning from red to a bright golden yellow. Instead of pain, he felt a warm, tingling sensation spreading up his arm. Paul waited for the organ failure and swift death that Altarian folklore promised. Instead, his vision sharpened dramatically. Colors became more vivid, and he could suddenly see individual leaves in the canopy 30 feet above. His hearing improved too, allowing him to distinguish between different insect calls throughout the forest. The tingling sensation reached his chest, and his heart began beating faster. Not with panic or fear, but with incredible energy. He felt stronger, more alert, more alive than ever before. "This is impossible," he whispered, examining his wrist. The cut had already stopped bleeding, and the torn skin was healing at a visible rate. He looked up at the death fruits hanging above him. If just contact with a thorn had produced these effects, what would the fruit itself do? Every rational part of his mind screamed warnings, but Paul's enhanced senses were intoxicating. He could smell the complex chemical signatures of dozens of different plants, hear small animals moving through the undergrowth hundreds of meters away, and see the subtle patterns of air currents moving through the forest. Before he could stop himself, he reached up and plucked one of the crimson fruits directly with his bare hand. The moment his fingers touched the smooth surface, another wave of enhancement washed over him. His reflexes became lightning fast, his muscle strength increased noticeably, and his mind began processing information at incredible speed. Paul found himself analyzing the forest ecosystem in real time, understanding predator-prey relationships and chemical communications between plants that would have taken weeks to research normally. The death fruit wasn't just enhancing his physical abilities, it was amplifying his cognitive functions as well. He took a small bite. The fruit's flesh was sweet and complex, with flavors that his enhanced taste buds could appreciate in incredible detail. Within seconds, the effects intensified further. His night vision became so acute that he no longer needed his flashlight. His hearing was so sensitive that he could track individual animals moving through the forest. More importantly, his mind felt supercharged. Engineering problems that had puzzled him for months suddenly seemed trivial. He could visualize complex mechanical systems in perfect detail and identify optimization solutions instantly. "The Altarians were wrong," he said aloud, his voice sounding strange in his own enhanced hearing. "This isn't poison. This is evolution." Paul spent the next hour exploring his new capabilities. He could climb trees with ease, his enhanced strength and coordination making the ascent effortless. He could identify chemical compounds by smell alone and process visual information so quickly that the forest seemed to move in slow motion. When he finally returned to his transport pod, Paul felt like a completely different person. The human who had landed on Verdania seemed weak and limited by comparison. These new abilities made him feel truly alive for the first time. During the flight back to the Endeavor, he carefully planned his approach. Rebecca would want scientific documentation, controlled testing, gradual introduction of the concept. But Paul knew with absolute certainty that once she experienced the death fruit's effects, she would understand. The containment unit held 3 additional fruits he had collected after his transformation. More than enough to share with the rest of the crew, once they understood what they were really dealing with. As he docked with the Endeavor, Paul realized that everything had changed. Not just for him, but potentially for all of humanity. The Altarians called it death fruit because they couldn't survive its effects, but for humans, it might represent the next stage of evolution. He sealed the fruits in the laboratory's secure storage and began documenting his experience. Rebecca would want detailed reports, and Paul's enhanced cognitive abilities made the writing process incredibly efficient. By morning, he had produced a comprehensive analysis of his physical and mental improvements, complete with theoretical explanations for the biochemical mechanisms involved. The death fruit contained symbiotic organisms that enhanced human nervous system function, while reinforcing cellular structure throughout the body. When Rebecca arrived at the lab, she found Paul working with inhuman efficiency, his movements precise and his thinking clearly accelerated beyond normal human levels. "Paul?" she said uncertainly. "What happened to you?" He turned to face her, and Rebecca saw immediately that his eyes had changed. They were brighter, more focused, with an intensity that made her instinctively step backward. "I found out what the death fruit really does," he said, his voice carrying new confidence and authority. "And Rebecca, you need to try it." Rebecca stared at Paul in disbelief. His transformation was undeniable but terrifying. He moved with fluid precision, his eyes tracking multiple objects simultaneously, and he seemed to be processing their conversation at superhuman speed. "You ate it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You actually ate the death fruit. I didn't plan to, Paul replied, organizing lab equipment with mechanical efficiency. But when the thorn cut me, I realized the Altarian warnings were based on their biology, not ours. Look at me, Rebecca. Do I look like I'm dying? She had to admit he'd looked healthier than she had ever seen him. His skin had a vibrant quality, his movements were graceful and powerful, and his mental acuity seemed dramatically enhanced. The biochemical analysis is fascinating, Paul continued, pulling up data on the lab's main screen. The fruit contains microscopic organisms that integrate with human neural tissue. They enhance synaptic transmission, improve cellular repair mechanisms, and optimize metabolic processes. Rebecca studied the data Paul had compiled. In one night, he had produced more detailed analysis than she would have expected from a team of specialists working for weeks. The information was accurate, comprehensive, and presented with scientific rigor she had never seen from Paul before. This is impossible, she murmured. Symbiotic organisms don't work this way. The integration process alone should take months, not hours. That's old thinking, Paul said with a slight smile. The death fruit organisms are incredibly sophisticated. They're designed to merge with compatible nervous systems almost instantly. Lisa entered the lab and immediately sensed the tension. What's going on? Paul, you look different. He ate the death fruit, Rebecca said without taking her eyes off the data. Lisa's face went pale. What, Paul, are you insane? We need to get you to medical immediately. I'm fine, Paul said, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to catch a falling beaker that Lisa had knocked over in her shock. Better than fine. I'm enhanced. Over the following days, Paul's arguments became increasingly persuasive. He demonstrated his new abilities constantly, solving complex engineering problems in minutes, repairing equipment with unprecedented precision, and displaying physical capabilities that bordered on superhuman. Dr. Helen Carter, the ship's medical officer, ran extensive tests on Paul's condition. Her findings were disturbing and fascinating in equal measure. His cellular regeneration rate is 5 times normal, she reported to Rebecca privately. His neural activity shows patterns I've never seen. Brain scans indicate increased connectivity between regions, enhanced processing speed, and improved memory formation. Any negative effects? Rebecca asked. Helen hesitated. His empathy responses are diminished. Emotional processing seems muted compared to cognitive enhancement. But his physical health is perfect. Better than perfect, actually. Word of Paul's transformation spread quickly through the ship's crew of 30 personnel. Initially, most reacted with horror and demanded his quarantine. But as days passed and Paul continued demonstrating incredible abilities without any apparent negative consequences, attitudes began shifting. Communications Officer David Wong was the first to approach Paul privately. Is it really safe? He asked during a quiet moment in the engineering bay. Safer than staying normal, Paul replied. Look at what I can do now. Imagine what our species could become. Within a week, David had tried the fruit. His transformation was equally dramatic. His communication skills and linguistic processing enhanced beyond anything Rebecca had imagined possible. He began intercepting and decoding Altarian transmissions effortlessly, providing insights into their culture that had eluded the research team for months. Security Chief Anna Torres was next. Her enhanced reflexes and situational awareness made her an incredibly effective protector, able to anticipate problems before they developed and respond to threats with inhuman precision. The transformations continued despite Rebecca's protests. Each enhanced crew member became an advocate, demonstrating abilities that made their unchanged colleagues feel inadequate by comparison. You have to try it, David urged Rebecca during a team meeting. The cognitive enhancement alone would revolutionize your research. Imagine understanding alien biochemistry at this level. Rebecca watched her enhanced crew members work with perfect coordination, their individual abilities combining into something greater than the sum of their parts. They completed tasks in hours that previously required days, solved problems that had seemed impossible, and displayed a level of competence that made her feel primitive. But she also noticed subtle changes in their behavior. They spoke to unchanged crew members with thinly veiled condescension, made decisions without consulting others, and showed decreased concern for established protocols and safety measures. We need to contact Earth, she told Lisa during one of their private conversations. Command needs to know what's happening here. The enhanced crew controls communications now, Lisa replied. David says he's protecting us from misunderstandings, but he's essentially censoring all our transmissions. Rebecca realized that she and the 8 remaining unchanged crew members were effectively prisoners aboard their own ship. The enhanced humans weren't hostile, but they made it clear that they considered normal humans inferior and incapable of making proper decisions. The Altarians began sending increasingly frantic messages to the Endeavor. Their monitoring systems had detected unusual energy signatures around the deathfruit groves, and they suspected human involvement. Tell them everything is normal, Paul instructed David. We can't let them panic over their superstitions. But Rebecca could see the Altarian transmissions before David filtered them. The messages spoke of ancient warnings, of previous species that had encountered the deathfruit and vanished from galactic civilization. The Altarians weren't just afraid of the fruit itself. They were terrified of what it did to intelligent species who consumed it. Late one night, Rebecca managed to intercept an unfiltered transmission from the Altarian leadership. The message was addressed to the Galactic Council and contained a single, terrifying phrase repeated in multiple languages. The Devourers have returned. She began to understand that humanity had stumbled into something far more dangerous than anyone realized. The deathfruit wasn't just enhancing her crew members. It was changing them into something the galaxy had encountered before, something so dangerous that entire civilizations had been warned about it for generations. As she watched Paul and the other enhanced humans work with inhuman efficiency and cold logic, Rebecca realized that she might be witnessing the end of humanity as they knew it, and the birth of something that the rest of the galaxy would learn to fear. Rebecca worked frantically in the secure data archive, one of the few areas of the ship that the enhanced crew hadn't yet modified with their improved efficiency protocols. She had been researching Altarian historical records for 3 days, using her xenolinguistics training to decode ancient texts that predated their current civilization. What she discovered chilled her to the bone. The deathfruit had a history. According to records dating back 12,000 years, the Altarians hadn't always lived in small settlements scattered across multiple worlds. They had once been a unified civilization on their home planet, a species of explorers and builders who had achieved early spaceflight and established colonies throughout their local stellar region. Then they had discovered the crimson fruits growing on a forest moon in their system. The ancient texts were fragmentary, but Rebecca pieced together a horrifying story. Altarian scientists had studied the fruits and found them to be harmless to their species, causing only mild digestive upset. But the fruits had attracted other visitors to their system, a species the texts called the hunger-touched. These visitors had consumed the fruits and transformed, becoming something that the Altarians described as devourers of worlds and souls. The enhanced beings had systematically hunted down and consumed not just the Altarians, but eventually turned on their own unchanged kind as well. Rebecca's hands shook as she translated the final passages. The Altarian homeworld had been stripped bare, not just of resources but of all complex life. The survivors had fled to distant worlds and spent generations developing weapons to destroy every deathfruit tree they could find. But they had missed some. Trees on uninhabited moons, forests in unexplored systems. The deathfruits had survived, waiting for the next species to discover them. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to the archive. Rebecca quickly encrypted her research as the door opened to reveal Paul, moving with his characteristic enhanced grace. "Rebecca," he said, his voice carrying the subtle authority that all the enhanced crew had developed. "You've been spending a lot of time in here. Is there something specific you're researching?" "Just trying to understand Altarian culture better," she replied, hoping her nervousness didn't show. "Their reaction to the fruit seems so extreme." Paul studied her with his enhanced perception. Rebecca knew he could read micro-expressions, detect stress hormones by smell, and process her behavioral patterns faster than she could consciously control them. "You found something," he said. It wasn't a question. Rebecca considered lying, but Paul's enhanced abilities made deception nearly impossible. "I found historical records about other species that encountered the deathfruit, and they called your kind devourers," she said quietly. "Every civilization that encountered enhanced humans eventually fell, not to war or conquest, but to consumption. Paul's expression didn't change, but Rebecca noticed his pupil dilation and the slight tension in his jaw muscles. Consume how? Rebecca pulled up her research on the main screen. The enhanced don't just eat the fruit. Eventually, they start consuming other life forms to maintain their abilities. It begins with enhanced metabolism requiring more food, then progresses to hunting behavior, and finally to something the texts describe as soul drinking. Altarian superstition, Paul said. But his voice lacked conviction. Multiple independent sources, Rebecca countered. 7 different civilizations over 15,000 years, all describing the same pattern. Enhancement, transformation, consumption, extinction. Paul was quiet for several minutes, his enhanced mind processing the information at superhuman speed. Rebecca watched his facial expressions cycle through calculation, concern, and finally something that looked disturbingly like hunger. How long do we have? He asked. According to the patterns, the enhanced begin hunting unchanged members of their own species within 30 to 60 days of transformation. You've been enhanced for 2 weeks. Paul nodded slowly. The cravings have started. Not for food exactly. Something deeper. The others feel it too. Rebecca felt ice forming in her stomach. What kind of cravings? We look at you unchanged humans and we see potential. Not just physical potential, but something else. Like there's energy locked inside you that we could access if we knew how. The texts call it life essence, Rebecca said. The enhanced eventually learn to extract and consume the bioelectric energy that powers consciousness itself. Fascinating, Paul said, his scientific curiosity apparently undiminished by the horrifying implications. So we're not just enhanced humans anymore. We're becoming something that feeds on other sapient life. Rebecca stared at him in shock. Doesn't that concern you? Paul considered the question with the same detached analysis he applied to engineering problems. Should it? Evolution has always involved one form of life consuming others. This is just more efficient. The casual tone of his response terrified Rebecca more than any threat could have. The enhanced crew weren't becoming monsters in the traditional sense. They were becoming something worse, predators who retained their intelligence and humanity while losing their moral constraints. Paul, you need to stop this. All of you need to stop consuming the fruit. We've tried, he admitted. The symbiotic organisms require regular feeding. Without the fruit compounds, we experience withdrawal that's indescribable. Physical pain, mental anguish, and a hunger that grows stronger every hour. Rebecca realized the full scope of the trap they had fallen into. The death fruit didn't just enhance humans. It enslaved them to its biochemical processes while gradually stripping away their empathy and moral reasoning. The other unchanged crew members, she said. Are we in immediate danger? Paul's enhanced senses detected her stress hormones, her elevated heart rate, her fear. Rebecca could see him processing her emotional state like data, analyzing her reactions without any apparent emotional response of his own. Not immediate, he said finally. But Rebecca, you should understand something. We don't want to hurt you. We want to improve you. The enhancement process could give you abilities beyond anything you've imagined, and turn me into a predator like you're becoming. Evolution isn't always pretty, Paul replied, but it's necessary. As he left the archive, Rebecca began planning desperately. She had perhaps 2 weeks before the enhanced crew progressed to active hunting behavior, 2 weeks to find a way to reverse the process, escape the system, or warn the galaxy about what humanity was becoming. But first, she needed to contact the Altarians and learn how their ancestors had fought the Devourers 12,000 years ago. If any records of successful resistance existed, the Altarians would have them. Outside the archive, she could hear the enhanced crew working with their usual inhuman efficiency, preparing modifications to the ship that would make it better suited for their transformed needs. Time was running out. The ship's emergency beacon activated at 0300 hours, its piercing wail echoing through the corridors of the Endeavor. Rebecca jolted awake in her quarters, immediately knowing that something had gone terribly wrong. She found Lisa and the 6 other unchanged crew members gathered in the auxiliary control room, their faces pale with fear and exhaustion. Medical Officer Helen Carter was treating wounds on Security Specialist Marcus Webb's arms. They tried to feed on Marcus during the night shift, Lisa explained, her voice shaking. David held him down while Anna attempted some kind of energy extraction process. Marcus looked up from Helen's medical attention. It felt like they were pulling the life out of me. Not physically, but something deeper, like they were draining my soul through my skin. Rebecca examined the wounds. They were unlike anything she had seen before. Not cuts or burns, but areas where the skin seemed desiccated, as if the life force had literally been sucked out of the tissue. "How did you escape?" she asked. "The process didn't work completely," Marcus replied. "They seemed frustrated, said I wasn't ripe enough yet. But they'll try again." Rebecca realized they had reached the hunting phase described in the Altarian texts. The enhanced crew had progressed beyond consuming the death fruit to actively seeking the life essence of their unchanged colleagues. "We need to get to the communications array," she said. "Send a warning to Earth and the Altarian Confederation." "The enhanced crew controls all primary systems," Helen said. "They've locked us out of navigation, communications, and life support controls." Lisa pulled Rebecca aside. "It gets worse. I've been monitoring their conversations through the ventilation system. They're not planning to return to Earth." "What do you mean?" "They want to establish a colony on Verdania. Use the death fruit to transform more humans. Build a breeding population of enhanced beings. Paul calls it guided evolution for the improvement of the species." Rebecca felt sick. If the enhanced crew succeeded, they would create a permanent base for transforming humans into predators. Eventually, they would spread throughout human space, converting or consuming everyone they encountered. "There has to be a way to reverse the process," she said. "Some kind of treatment or antidote." Helen shook her head. "I've analyzed Paul's blood samples from before and after his transformation. The symbiotic organisms have completely integrated with his nervous system. Removing them would probably kill him. Then we need to destroy the fruit supply on Verdania," Rebecca decided. "Cut off their source before they can establish a permanent colony." Marcus looked up from his bandages. "How?" "They control the ship, the shuttles, everything." Rebecca had been thinking about this problem for days. "The Altarians. They've been trying to contact us. If we can reach them, they might help us destroy the death fruit trees." "The enhanced crew would never allow direct communication with the Altarians," Lisa said. "Then we don't ask permission." That night, Rebecca implemented a desperate plan. Using maintenance tunnels and service corridors, she made her way to the emergency communication pod located in the ship's outer hull. The pod was designed for situations where the main communications array was damaged, with its own power supply and transmission capabilities. The enhanced crew's superhuman senses made stealth nearly impossible, but Rebecca counted on their overconfidence. They considered the unchanged humans to be helpless prey, not a potential threat. She managed to establish contact with the Altarian Confederation just as dawn broke over Verdania's surface. The response was immediate and urgent. "Human vessel," came the translated message. "We have monitored dangerous changes in the death fruit regions. Are your people compromised?" 22 of 30 crew members are enhanced," Rebecca transmitted quickly. "They're planning to establish a colony and transform more humans. We need your help." The transmission went silent for several minutes. When it resumed, a different voice spoke with grave authority. "We are the keepers of the ancient war. Our ancestors fought the Devourers 12,000 years ago. Listen carefully, human Rebecca. The enhanced cannot be saved, only contained." Rebecca's heart sank, but she continued listening. "The symbiotic organisms eventually consume their hosts from within. The enhanced believe they are becoming superior beings, but they are merely transitional forms. In time, they will become pure hunger, losing all traces of their original species." "How do we stop them?" "Fire," the Altarian replied. "The organisms cannot survive extreme heat. Our ancestors developed thermal weapons that could destroy both the fruit and the enhanced simultaneously. We don't have weapons like that. Your ship's fusion drive can be overloaded to create thermal detonation. The blast will sterilize the surface of Verdania and destroy all remaining death fruit trees." Rebecca realized what the Altarian was suggesting. That would kill everyone on the ship too. "Yes, it is the only way to prevent the spread. Our ancestors made the same sacrifice to save the galaxy from the previous outbreak." The communication pod's door suddenly opened, revealing Paul and 3 other enhanced crew members. Their expressions were calm but predatory, like hunters who had finally cornered their prey. "Rebecca," Paul said with his characteristic enhanced precision, "you've been very busy tonight." She backed against the pod's far wall, knowing there was nowhere to run. "Paul, you have to understand what you're becoming." The Altarians explained everything. "The organisms will eventually destroy you too. We've considered that possibility, Paul replied. Our analysis suggests the techs are exaggerated. Besides, even if the transformation continues, we'll have experienced capabilities beyond normal human limitations. That seems like a worthwhile trade. You'll lose your humanity entirely. Paul smiled, and Rebecca saw something cold and alien in his expression. Humanity is just a starting point, Rebecca. Evolution requires leaving the old forms behind. The enhanced crew members moved closer, and Rebecca could feel the same draining sensation that Marcus had described. Her life force seemed to pull toward them like iron filings toward magnets. We've learned from our mistakes with Marcus, Anna Torres said. The extraction process works better on subjects who are calm and willing. Rebecca's hand found the emergency controls for the fusion drive. The Altarians were right. Containment was the only option now. I'm sorry, she whispered, thinking of Lisa, Helen, Marcus, and the other unchanged crew members still trapped aboard the ship. Her finger moved toward the overload sequence. Paul's enhanced reflexes were faster, but Rebecca had positioned herself carefully. As his hand reached for her wrist, she activated the thermal detonation protocol. The last thing she saw was Paul's face, his enhanced intelligence finally understanding what she had done. For just a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of the old Paul, grateful that someone had made the hard choice he couldn't make himself. 3 days later, Altarian observation ships detected the thermal signature of Verdania's sterilization. The entire moon's surface had been scoured clean, destroying every death fruit tree and eliminating the enhanced human colony before it could spread. The Altarian Confederation sent a message to Earth, explaining what had happened to the Endeavor and its crew. They praised the sacrifice of Dr. Rebecca Stone and her companions, who had chosen extinction over evolution when they realized what their species was becoming. Earth's response was swift and absolute. All exploration in sectors containing death fruit was prohibited. The crimson fruits were reclassified as an existential threat to human civilization. But deep in Earth's biological research facilities, a few scientists wondered what enhancements the death fruit might offer if properly controlled. If carefully studied and gradually introduced, perhaps the transformation process could be managed safely. After all, they reasoned, humans had always been curious about forbidden fruit.